What's up guys, Stephen Cult of Mac here, and we now know that this year's WWDC keynote will take place on June the 4th in San Jose. So in this video, I thought we could take a look at what we can expect to see from this year's event. Let's get started. The biggest and usually most anticipated reveal is the latest release of iOS. This year will be no different, with Apple giving us our first preview of iOS 12. Reportedly codenamed Peace internally, the main launch features for iOS 12 will reportedly involve allowing a single set of apps to work across both iOS and macOS, possibly including a smart hub home, as well as a digital health tool for monitoring screen time, so parents can keep an eye on the amount of time their kids have been using their iPhones and iPads. There's also likely to be improvements to animojis, such as new characters, and an easier to navigate menu. If you've been waiting for a hugely redesigned OS, it's looking like that won't be until 2019. While a lot of people will be disappointed with not having a new look for their iPhone OS, it does mean that Apple's software engineers won't have to rush to finish features in time for a new iPhone launch, which in turn should mean less bugs with the initial release of iOS 12. Shazam will be integrated more too, with Apple's latest acquisition of the service, and hopefully AirPlay 2 will finally be released. There's also rumours out there about multi-user FaceTime calls to take on Skype, as well as screen sharing, which will be perfect to show my mum how to upload pictures to Facebook and then how to untag me. Another possible but unlikely update could be multiple user accounts for the iPad. That way you could more easily share your iPad with family members, or make it easier to use iPads in the workplace. The first developer beta for iOS 12 should be released straight after the announcement, so make sure to subscribe to see our hands-on as soon as it becomes available, and then the general release to the public will be in mid to late September. While everyone gets excited about iOS, I'm always waiting to see what Apple has done with macOS. As I mentioned with iOS 12, one of the biggest features for the next version of the Mac operating system would be the merging of iOS and Mac apps. In a report from Bloomberg, it says that Apple plans to give people a new way to use a single set of apps that work equally well across its family of devices. Not only could this be great for end users, but it will also give the Mac App Store some new life instead of it just being a portal to update your Mac. As with pretty much every release of a new macOS, security will play a big part, especially with the amount of vulnerabilities that have been unearthed in recent months, along with general speed and bug fixes, such as faster waking and unlocking. We may see some design tweaks, but nothing major, along with updates to Control Center, which could give it access to system preferences, a new app switcher, and maybe an updated Apple menu. While I'm not keeping my hopes up for an iTunes update, it could really do with a rebuild. It's one of Apple's clunkiest apps, and it can just seem awkward to navigate. While we have no clue on what the next version of macOS will be called, there's a good chance it'll be named after another California area. Apple improved the Apple Watch in leaps and bounds last year thanks to the Series 3 and watchOS 4. This year we expect watchOS 5 to add a slew of new features to make the watch even more compelling. Just like a redesigned OS, most people will be after new watch faces. While I do think that Apple will add 2 or 3 new faces, I'd personally like to see options for third-party apps to control the faces, sort of like a watch face app store. Personally, I don't think this will happen anytime soon, as just like with the iOS home screen, Apple wants the faces of their products to always look pretty. A rumour that keeps popping up when it comes to watchOS 5 is sleep tracking. It's a feature that's lacking in the Apple Watch that you can find in a lot of other fitness trackers and smartwatches. The issue here is though that most people need to charge their Apple Watches each and every night. So unless the next Apple Watch has an even bigger battery, it would probably go to waste. Other updates could include the Podcasts and Notes app finally making their way to the watch, along with the Calculator app, which seems like a no-brainer, along with an always-on mode so that the time is visible without putting too much strain on the battery. The Apple TV, in my opinion, doesn't get enough love, but its updates to its operating system tend to be kind of minimal. Last year, Tim Cook & Co didn't give any stage time to tvOS, despite a new automatic dark and light mode, full AirPod support and home screen sync. This year, there's not many mumblings about what we will see with tvOS 12. I think Apple will highlight its HomeKit capabilities, as most people don't know that it can act as a hub the same way HomePod can, along with tons of promotion for its original shows through Apple Music. It'd be nice to see Apple separate its video productions away from Apple Music and offer some sort of subscription to compete with Netflix, although I can only imagine just how difficult those negotiations would be with the film studios. Moving on to hardware, and this year we could finally see a worthy update to the Mac Pro line. Apple has already announced that it is working on a new Mac Pro, and it's about time. The current Mac Pro has been around since 2013, with a slight power boost last year. The new Mac Pro will be, and I quote, Apple's highest-end, high-throughput desktop system designed for our demanding Pro customers. The new Mac Pro will turn away from its current cylindrical design and instead be designed so it's easy to improve the hardware. I think that this could be a modular system so that Apple could limit upgrades to coming directly through them rather than through third-party suppliers. While Apple didn't say that it would be released in 2018, I think it's likely we'll at least get a preview at this year's WWDC. Shipping times will likely be towards the end of the year, or even early 2019. After all of the promises last year, this is something a lot of people will be waiting for. Myself included, as my Mac Pro is starting to show its age. It's not just the Mac Pro that could see a refresh. WWDC could also bring updates to the MacBook and MacBook Pro. Let's start with the MacBook, and the changes will probably be minimal, especially in terms of design. It's already super thin and light, although it could have a new display from LG with a 2560 by 1600 resolution. There's also the possibility of them adding a 13-inch model to begin phasing out the MacBook Air. It's likely that the new MacBook will feature an Apple-designed chip as they become more self-reliant on internal parts. It's possible but highly unlikely that we'll see a touch bar being added to the MacBook, although I do think it would help with third-party developers in seeing the need to support it. Adobe has done a great job with its function keys, and adding it to the cheaper MacBook would see it become more popular. There's also rumours for both the MacBook and MacBook Pro of a second screened keyboard, as we've seen with Apple's recent patent filings, although I hope to God this isn't true. But speaking of the MacBook Pro, I think the changes will also be minimal. The design is only 2 years old and it still looks great, but it is possible that they could add gold and rose gold to the colour lineup. One thing that could do with updating is the displays. Not only is the 15-inch model not 4K, but it can't output the full Adobe RGB colour space. And as it's a Pro machine, a lot of the MacBook Pro customers are Adobe users. The MacBook Pro will probably see its processor updated to Intel's Coffee Lake to deliver a 30% performance increase over the current Kaby Lake processors, along with the usual improved battery life. Although again, Apple might develop their own processor so they're more independent and don't succumb to vulnerabilities like Spectre again. One of the most loved iPhones ever, the iPhone SE, could finally see a sequel this year. According to a rumour out of Apple's supply chain, the new iPhone SE2 will be assembled by Taiwanese manufacturer Winstrom. The design is likely to be the same as the current model, according to China's Economic Daily News. It'll pack the same 4-inch LCD display, or perhaps a slightly improved 4.2-inch display, with a Touch ID home button along with an A10 processor and 2 gigs of RAM. Storage options are rumoured to be set at 32 and 128GB variants, with the cheapest model priced around $450. Other rumours do speculate though that the new iPhone SE could include a glass back to allow for wireless charging like the iPhone 8, 8 Plus and 10. Last but not least, Apple could bring some updates to its iPad Pro line, bringing with it some of the best features from the iPhone X. Face ID will more than likely make its way to the new iPad Pro with the addition of the True Depth camera, as the Pro models tend to follow suit of the flagship iPhone before it. That would therefore mean the home button would be removed and allowing for the edge-to-edge display I've dreamed of for years. If past releases are anything to go by, and they usually are, the iPad Pro will feature an A11X Bionic chip, which would essentially be a boosted version of the iPhone 8 and X's A11 Bionic chip. Since I've had the iPhone X, using my iPad Pro has become a little bit awkward. I've grown used to the new gestures and lack of a home button, and if Apple brought all of that loveliness to the iPad, I think they could be onto a winner. My only worry with the new iPad Pro would be the price tag, as the iPhone X is $1,000, I can only imagine what the new iPad Pro would be. There's also reports of a new cheaper 9.7-inch iPad, and that it'll be released in the second quarter of this year, but not much more than that. Well, that's it for this video. Thank you all for watching, but let me know in the comments section down below what you would like to see announced at this year's WWDC. Also, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.